Hello everyone, welcome back. In the third video, I just want to get us set up with unit testing on our .NET side of the house and get the code coverage going. So to do that, we have a couple of quick steps we want to do. Let's go over to Visual Studio Code. The first things we want to do is we're going to want to add some new tasks. So I already dropped them in here. It's this section right here, and I'll just kind of walk you through what it's doing. So the first task in here is to clean up the old coverage files. Whenever we do our unit testing and we want our coverage to be updated, it's going to create some files that can be referenced by different extensions that are going to read that to help us keep track of what's being covered and what's not. So you're going to want to add this section here. The command that it's running is remove item, which is a PowerShell command. The type is shell because we're going to be doing different shell commands. And the arguments we have, the first argument is -error action. And the flag that we're setting there is ignore. So on the next parameter argument, you want to have ignore. The next parameter after that, we're telling it what's the folder or items that we want to delete. Well, inside of our workspace folder, we're going to have a folder called coverage. And that's going to be where all the files are created. And the next parameter after that is force, followed by recurse. So it's going to force the deletion, and it's going to do it recursively, so it does it inside of other folders and the files inside of those folders, on up the different chain of, or down the chain of folders into just the specific coverage files. Now, if you look at this second to last parameter here, we've got a semicolon at the end there. That's not a typo. That's me telling this task that it's really the end of the command. So even though we're only running one command here, I actually want to do two commands at the same time. So I've got this semicolon here, and then my next argument is just to return 0. And so what that's going to do is it's going to tell the task that I returned successfully no matter what just happened before me. So if this remove item fails, and it will fail under certain circumstances, maybe you don't even have a coverage folder yet. The first time you run this task, it's going to try to run and delete the coverage files, and the folder doesn't even exist. Well, that would be an error, and that would stop the unit test with coverage from even creating the folder in the first place when the next step. So we just want to go ahead and return 0 no matter what. There's nothing that's going to happen in here that we really care to know about. It will tell us, certain things, but this return 0 is just saying continue no matter what. And the error action here, you might think that that's what that's supposed to be doing. And in a way it sort of is, but there's other parameters that can be passed here that maybe they would actually even be asking you a question and waiting for your response in the terminal before it would even continue the task. So we're just going to ignore any of the errors. Don't ask us anything. Force it all to happen. Look through all the folders that are a part of the coverage folder, and then return a success at the end. And moving on to the next task, we've called it run unit tests with coverage. And you can see here that it says depends on, and this is the name or the label of the task above that we just talked about. So these names have to match, but we're saying that if we try to run this second task here, if we try to run the unit test with coverage, first I want you to run this task and make sure that's a success, which it's always going to be because of the return 0 we have here. And what is this task down here? Well, it's a .NET command, so the type is process here. And the arguments that we're passing in, the first one is test. So really the command that we're running is .NET space test with these parameters here. So you can see I've got -- collect, and I'm just escaping out these double quotes, which is why the backslashes are here. but we have xplat space code space coverage as the value to that flag. And what that's doing is it's saying the project that we run .NET tests on, I want for the collector, just use the default collector that's been specified by the project. And in our website.test project, the template that we use happened to have the collector coverlet. So that's perfectly fine. It's going to pick whichever one is involved in our test project. And here the final parameter is the results directory. This is what we told. This is where we told it to put all the coverage files, and that's the same folder that we told up here where to delete and clean up the coverage files from. So that's it for the new tasks. The next thing you might wonder is, well, how do we even run these tasks? The simple way to run these tasks is to just hit the F1 key, and then you can type in run task, and if you hit enter, it's going to give you a list of the tasks that are available. So what are the tasks that we want to run? Well, we don't need to run the cleanup because the cleanup's going to be run always when we run the unit test with coverage. So let's just select the unit test with coverage. I just, arrow up and down to it and I select enter. And it's given me one more option. What kind of errors and warnings do we want to scan for the test output? I'm just going to enter one more time to continue with the default. So the first command here it did was the remove item with the parameters, and then it returned 0, and the terminal detected it was done, and then it started on the second task. So here we have the .NET.exe, and then it's the test parameter along with the other ones that we told it. And what did it do? Well, it went ahead and did our test. It found one test. And out of that one test, it says it passed the one test and it's done. So in here in the attachments, you can see that just like we expected, it put things inside a coverage file or folder along with that GUID and a file called coverage.cobertura.xml. Now, nothing is just by default going to be looking for that file to use. And if you installed the same extensions as me, you have one called coverage gutters. So we need to now tell coverage gutters about the existence of these coverage.cobertura.xml files. So go into your settings, preferences, settings, and if you scroll down into the extensions folder, and so let me just open that up. And what we're looking for now is the Coverage Gutters plugin that we installed. And here you can find different settings related to the different plugins, but in this case, the Coverage Gutters. And I'm going to go ahead and click Edit in Settings.json. So let's edit this file and ignore what just came up by default. No big deal. Now you can see I've already added this last line here. But in addition to these other files, I mean, we could technically delete them, but I'm just going to leave them. We also wanted to know about the existence of the coverage.cobertura.xml. So just go ahead and write that in yours and save it. Now, since we already ran the code coverage and we already had the results there, you can see down here in the bottom bar of Visual Studio Code, there's a little button here that says Watch. So we're going to want to click that. And you can see right now it just says no coverage because the file that we're in has no unit test coverage, which makes perfect sense for this JSON file. But let's go into an easy thing to unit test would be this weather forecast.cs. And if you look here, it says no coverage. So why is there no coverage? Because we don't have any unit tests that actually test anything about this weather forecast model that we have here. So just to keep things simple, our test project, if we want to use anything in the other one, I don't know if it'll do it for us by default. Let's just test it out. We'll just say var model equals new weather forecast. And I don't see any sort of IntelliSense popping up. No, nothing that it wants to import a reference for us. So in order for our test project to be able to use code, which it needs to be able to do inside of the actual website code, we need to just go ahead and let's right click on our website.test folder over here in Visual Studio Code, open in the integrated terminal, and all that is just again because I wanted to come to a terminal window that had the right path on it. Now, what do we need to do here to add the reference? You could come into your website.cs projects file, and you could just go ahead and paste in some code somewhere like this, and this would work perfectly fine. You'd save it, but you shouldn't have to type it like that. What you can do is you could do a reference inside the .NET CLI. Let's just save all these files. I don't like having files that are unsaved open. And what we'll do is we'll run a new command from inside of this folder called .NET add, and I guess we need to reference our project that we're adding them to first. So we'll do website.test, and I don't know if we need the extension on this or not. And then what we're adding to that project is a reference, and the reference that we're adding should be looking at the, I don't know if we want to go up a folder for this or not, but what I'll do is I'll just use a relative path like this and see how it likes it. And we'll do website/website.cs project. Now, of course, your paths or your names might be slightly different here, but let's just run this and see if we have any errors. We actually did that wrong. Can't find the project or directory website.test. So it does want us to put the extension here. And if we run that command again, we have a success this time. And what I'm going to do is just show you. If we go back into our test project, and I think I had actually taken us into the wrong one earlier when I showed you, the demo. But you can see now we have that code actually in here. It's in the right project. And so now our test project knows about the website project. And that will give us access to then be able to use the code inside of that. So we have a new model. Let's go ahead and fill out a couple of the properties. Let's do the summary. We'll just say the summary equals testing. Now again, this isn't best practices right now or anything. I just want to show you the code coverage side of things. So we'll do summary, and let's change the date, set a date, and we'll just do datetime.now. Okay, so we have this model that is part of our website project, and we're touching two of the properties on it when we create this new model, this new class, whatever. So that doesn't do anything by itself. What we need to do is actually assert something about it. So as part of XUnit, the testing library that we picked when we set up this project, it has a bunch of commands under the class assert. So what do we want to assert? Let's just say assert equals, and we want to find the word testing as the property value for the model.summary. So if this fails, if for some reason maybe we were calling additional code in between here and it ended up changing the summary to not be testing anymore, this test would start failing. And we'll go into all the reasons why you need the unit test and the proper ways to do this here in a future video that's specifically on building our unit test, but this is just for getting it all set up. So we're just going to do something like, let's do 2 assertions in here. We'll assert that it's not null. And what are we asserting is not null? The model, the class that we created. And so this is a nullable type. That's perfectly fine. Let's save our unit test. And now let's generate. I'm going to hit F1. And I'm going to select Run Task. And we don't have to run our unit test this way, but we do have to run it this way if we want to update our code coverage. So you don't have to do this every time you write your unit tests, but we're going to go ahead and select the default options again. And you can see that it's trying to delete the old coverage files. And now it's running the new tests. So again, we just still have the one test. It passed its test, which meant that our assertions were still true. And if we were to look at our code coverage now, so the file that we referenced was weather forecast. So again, I'm just going to control and click on it. You can find it over here. You can hit F12 or probably 1,000 other hotkeys. But now when you look at this file, you'll see some lines over here on the very left side that are green and red. And down here at the bottom of our VS Code window, it says 50% code coverage. And it's of course 50% because 2 of the 4 properties have been part of the unit testing. So it knows that, in this scenario, having it on properties is pretty simple. It's just saying, I know that the getters and setters work for these properties that have the green on them. And for the ones with the red, it means we don't have anything testing these properties. So maybe there's a bug in them, something, maybe there's not. It doesn't know anything about them. You're not testing for it. So let's just say the temperature Celsius equals 55. I don't know why I keep picking 55 for the temperature, but I do. So we'll go ahead and one more time, F1. We're going to run task. If it's not popping up for you again, you just type in run task. And then we're going to use the arrow keys and we're going to select run unit test with coverage. Hit enter. Select the default option to continue without scanning the output again. And you can see that once our test pass, we'll go back to our weather forecast. And now you can see that our code coverage is at 75%. And we have 3 of the 4 properties being tested. Now we can't set that last property because it's just it's only got a getter on it. So maybe what we can do is just say model, maybe if we just did the math ourselves, we could just say, hey, assert equal, and we'll just say model, well, we'll do this side of it. This is what we expect. So if I knew the math, I guess I could go do it, but just for the sake of testing, I'm going to pick something that's going to fail testing so we can see what that looks like. And what do I expect to be the value of 66? I expect the temperature in Fahrenheit to be 66. So what do we need to do if we want to update our code coverage? We got to run tasks, we got to select run unit test with code coverage, and select that default option one more time. Now, we definitely don't expect the test to pass this time. So you can see here that our tests have failed. We have the one test and it's failed, and it's just telling us that the assertion equals failed, and it expected a value of 66, but now we're cheating because we don't have to do the math ourselves. We have a value of 130 actually being produced by the test here. So I'm going to copy that value so I can use it here after we're done. But if we were to look at the code coverage that takes place, and we come back over here, you can still see that the temperature Fahrenheit doesn't say that it's being covered. It's not green on the test coverage, even though we tested for it. And that's because it failed. So if we come over here and instead of looking for 66, we look for a 130, and the last time I promise you, we'll run the test. We'll run the test coverage, and we'll continue. This time we expect to see green, which we do, so we passed our test. And if we go back to the weather forecast model, it's still red, and I think that's because it's trying to look for a getter and setter here to say that we looked for it. I'm not exactly sure why this doesn't want to show. Maybe we actually needed to do something above the actual assertion here. So we'll just say var a equals model temperature Fahrenheit. We'll save that. We'll run the task with code coverage. And we passed again. We flip back over here. And I think it just doesn't like this style of code for some reason, to be honest. I'll look into that a little bit further, and I'll put it as like the top comment pinned or something like that if I can figure out what's going on there. I think it just doesn't like the fact that it doesn't have the normal getter associated with it. I guess we can test that real quick. We'll just say get, and the get is going to return that value right there. And we'll do that, and we'll do that. And we don't need that. So let's save this, and I promised you it was the last time, but that won't be the first time that I lie to you in these videos. I'm just doing all this off the cuff, and it still does not like that. I wonder if I need to close and reopen. It still doesn't seem to want to cover this getter. The setters were definitely working, the normal properties, but I don't know if it just can't test them or what exactly is going on there. You could, of course, come through and you could read this coverage file, and it's telling you the line numbers and the number of times that they got hit, etc. So if we were to look down here in the weather forecast, you can see it's got a get for the date, it's got a get for the temperature, and it's got a get for the temperature Fahrenheit as well. And it's saying the line number is 9, it's got a hit. So I don't know why it doesn't want to update when we actually open that folder. To be honest, I personally do most of my work inside of Visual Studio, so its code coverage on the professional and enterprise versions and all that it's really baked in, and it does a great job. So I'll look into this a little bit more. I just wanted to make sure that this was all kind of working with the free tools that we're going to be going through. And I think that's pretty much it for the code coverage. It does look like what's happening here is our code coverage files are not being deleted. So hopefully you don't have this problem, but I'm going to guess that I have a typo somewhere inside of here. It looks like it's cleaning up in the right spot. So I think it does not, I think what happened here is I put a space in front of the coverage. So on the flag for the results directory, just go ahead and remove that space if you put one before this folder name. And I will rename this folder to not have a space in front of it, just so well, let me just delete it so you don't think there's anything funny happening there. And I will just run this test, unit test code coverage. And you can see again, it made the coverage. It's just got the one GUID with the one file inside of it. If we were to run the test with coverage again, you can already see that it's wiping out that folder and it's adding it back. So we just have the new GUID with the new coverage file. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for getting your unit test and coverage test set up. There's other ways to, of course, call these tasks and everything, but just stick with the simple. You just hit F1, you run it, and I think before I cut the video, I'll show you if you have the extension for the .NET Core Test Explorer, you should also have this icon down here, the little flask. And if we click on that, you can see a list of all the unit tests that we have. We just have one. If I click on it, it will take us to the test itself. If I click the play button that's with it, it just seems like it wants to just take me to it. But if you right click on it and hit run test, you can see that it's going to run the test. And it's got a green checkbox because it passed the testing. You can see the little checkbox showed up here. And we also have the options here to run the test or to debug the test, the same as we did to go to test, debug test. And if you want to run all of your tests, you can hit the run all tests button up here. I don't believe in this plugin. In this plugin, you can't make different groups and do anything like that to run different groups at a time, but you could definitely, oh, here's the button over here that it wants to run, I guess. So the play button that's over here. And I think that was my last live for the video. So we're done with the test coverage. We're done with running your unit tests. And I appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.